right spot, and you know what's going on. So I'm not gonna. I'm gonna change a few things from what I was going to talk about because you guys all were here last week. Cindy wasn't, but Cindy, I know you already got the book, so we're not going to talk about it. So this is warm season vegetables. So the winter is cucumbers, peppers, and a squash is coming up third, but we have plenty of time. So cucumbers. Cucumbers, you can get them from plants. You can buy plants, you can buy seeds. If it was me, I would buy seeds because you'll get a lot more seeds than you will buying a plant. Now, grant, a plant, no, it is, yeah, a plant's a little cheaper. I went and looked before we started because I thought, I wonder what it is. And a package of seed was like $3.99 and a plant's going to be like $3.79 or something like that. Maybe $3.99, might be the same. But you can keep these seeds from year to year. So you're going to plant, you got the seeds, roll it up, stick it in a Ziploc bag and either put it in the refrigerator or put it in the freezer, and you'll be able to use it for several years. So that's what I would personally do, but it's either way. We sell a lot of cucumbers, plants, and I'm just like, you can probably have those things up in 2 or 3 days. So it's like, it's not that big a deal. And when you buy them, a lot of times when we get them in, it's like, I think they seeded these yesterday on that. So I would suggest seeds. Okay, now, when you talk to people about cucumbers, they say hill a cucumber. You'll plant them on hills. Well, the reason you plant them on a hill is what you're doing is you're mounding the soil up. You're making a bed that might be 12, 18 inches across, that might be 3 or 4 or 5 inches higher than the soil around it. And the reason you do that is because that warms the soil up quicker. They like warm soil. These are warm season vegetables, and they really like to be the soil warm. And so the warmer it is with the moisture, they'll pop up and take off and go on that. I'm not a big cucumber person, but I would venture to say that you could probably, if you wait, if you're not too rushing with it, you can get those up in about 2 or 3 days. So timing on those, I would say, let's see what the little book says. It says cucumbers, first part of May. I would probably, well, as we talked about before, it snowed on May the 9th. You get a day or a year that's cooler. I would venture to say that if you planted something towards the end of May and you planted something, say, the 10th of May or so, you get cold weather, they'll probably end up blooming and ripening about the same time. Because when these warm season plants are in a situation that they don't like, they kind of just sit there. It's like, I'm stopping at the stop sign and I'm not going anywhere on that. So don't rush it. They like it fairly warm on that. On cucumbers, there are bush type and let's say bush type. Okay, traditional cucumbers, a plant might get 3 to 4 foot wide. Actually, maybe even more if you had a better soil. So they take up some space, but they do have bush varieties now. And the bush varieties, again, if you have some good soil, I've planted some and probably they were about 2.5 foot wide. So they kept, they were much smaller. Now, when you plant the bush variety, the cucumber itself is going to be the same. You can't tell if it was planted on a vine or a bush on that. They won't produce as many per plant because there's not as much per plant. But that's a possibility if you didn't have a lot of space or if you wanted to put it in a container. Cucumbers are one that is very easy. It's a vining type plant. So it's super easy to put it on some sort of a trellis. Now, if you have it on a trellis, like a trellis, like a piece of lattice is probably, the spacing is too far apart. Something like, or you're going to have to do a little bit of weaving on it. Chicken wire or some of the bird netting is really good because it has little tendrils. It looks like stems that just wrap around. And if you watch those, they actually grow. They may start out straight and then they spiral. So they grab a hold of something and crawl up. And as long as you aren't too aggressive with, or not too lazy, let's say, I guess, with picking them, they aren't going to bust the vine down on that. So that's a good way to, I'm going to say, utilize your space better. Sometimes in what do I want to say? In raised beds, they will use cattle panels on that and do a half circle on it. Kim, I'm going to interrupt a second. We are recording this, and if you don't mind, then stay where you're at. But if not, take your picture off so you're not in the recording. Okay? Thank you. Okay. So you can, if you had a raised bed and wanted to utilize as much space as possible, if you took, and it doesn't matter, you could take, we use a piece of lattice. We actually have a little baby trellis that's made for gardens. It's kind of a teepee type shape. And then we can plant the cucumbers at the base and it crawls up it. And then they're right there. You have to kind of, don't put an end on it, because the problem is some of them will go through that and you have to pick them from the inside. So if you put an end on it, then it's like, how do you get your hand in there? And sometimes it's how do you get the cucumber out because it's long enough. But that could be a way to utilize some space, or save some space, I guess. Pick them when they're, keep on them. They'll get too big. And when they get too big, okay, I don't eat cucumbers, but they're bitter is what I understand. And they'll also get to the point that they're kind of had a yellow tinge to them and they're just overripe on that. That's fine if you're saving the seed, but you're not going to save the seed because that's a hybrid and it's not going to come true from seed. I mean, you could save the seed if you wanted, but it won't be exactly the same plant. It'll be different on that. So keep them, with any of these vegetables, keep the moisture to them. I mean, you don't have to overwater them, but keep a continuous supply of moisture and you'll have a continuous supply of crop. Cucumbers and squash, both are plants, and melons like cantaloupe, watermelon. They have male and female flowers. And the first ones to come on are usually the male flowers. So I get a lot of calls that say, well, my cucumber's blooming really well, but I don't have any cucumbers. Well, and that's why. Once it warms up a little bit and they get into the cycle of blooming, then you'll end up with some female flowers and you'll end up with the crop. So don't worry too much if you don't see any cucumbers yet. Just be patient. It's coming on that. And then they like it warm. So, and once it starts to cool down, you're not going to get much out of it on that. So, quickie on cucumbers. Okay. A little, what do I want to say? A little, PBA, let's say, is, and I know most of you know this, but Kim, if you have questions, you can type it into the chat thing and I'll usually answer them at the end because I can't read and talk. I'm not that talented. So, but usually you think of the question and you forget it. So go ahead and enter it if you need. Okay. Peppers. Peppers, there's hot peppers and there's bell peppers. And traditionally on the hot peppers, it seems like that as a general rule, now this is my observation, so I haven't read it anywhere, but the hotter the pepper, the longer it takes to mature. So the bell peppers, you want to grow those from plants, because if you you can start the seed indoors, but when you transplant out, you want to do plants, because if you plant seed out in the garden, it's going to take it too long for it to come up and mature before it gets cold. And they like it warm. They like it warmer than tomatoes. They're in the same family as tomatoes, so a lot of the things you do for tomatoes, you can do for peppers. But as a general recommendation, they recommend planting peppers about 2 weeks later than your tomatoes because they like it warm. On the bell peppers, there are, everybody thinks of green, but now they have varieties that are yellow, orange, red, purple. So they have a lot of variety. And again, I'm not a pepper person, but I would think they all taste the same. So, but you have that on your bell peppers, and then on your hot peppers, man, I don't mess with those. But you have everything from, I'm going to say relatively mild if you're a pepper person, to super, super hot on that. They are susceptible to the blossom end rot like the tomatoes. And the blossom end rot is, I'm going to say it's a nutrient deficiency. However, it's a nutrient deficiency based on temperature. So when it's cooler, what happens is the calcium in the soil is tied up. The plant can't utilize it. And so what happens is your first set of fruit usually are rotten at the bottom. It's called blossom end rot. And actually on your peppers or tomatoes, if it hasn't affected the whole plant, you can actually eat it. It's no big deal. You just cut it off. but it's very frustrating to have your first one damaged. So you can put calcium nitrate, which is a fertilizer, let's say. It's not, you know, it's micronutrients, it's calcium, it has some nitrogen too, obviously, with the nitrate, but basically there's calcium there so the plant can have something when it starts out. Eventually, as the soil warms up, it can utilize what's in the soil. So if you decide you want to plant early, whether it's tomatoes or peppers, that's not a bad idea. If you wait a little bit, I was telling somebody the other day, we were talking about tomatoes, obviously, but I don't plant mine until Memorial Day. And last year was the first year I had blossom end rot. And I think if you remember what last year was, it was a very mild May. It was cooler and wetter. And so I think because of that, the soil wasn't as warm in the end of May like it normally is. And so I had a little bit of damage with that. So if you want to be an early bird, that would be a way that, okay, I'm an early bird, but I'm going to get that tomato or I'm going to get that pepper. So, now the hot peppers, you know, they're going to take a little bit longer. I'm not a hot pepper person, but I've had more than one person tell me the hotter the year, the hotter the peppers on that. So when when you want hot peppers, and so not always, well, usually you don't have any control over the weather. So taking and putting them someplace where, okay, the dryer vent, the air conditioner unit, you know, someplace that's a little bit hotter on the south side of the house up against a brick wall. You know, places you make a little microclimate where it's a little bit hotter for it. Now realize in those situations, not only is it hotter, but it's going to dry out. If you can keep, and it doesn't matter what the vegetable is, if you can keep the soil moisture, I'm going to say constant, not necessarily is it super wet or super dry, but you know, it has some water all along. I let it dry out, and I would let it dry out because when it dries out, it says, oh, the water table isn't this shallow. I need to go a little deeper to find more moisture. And so they'll go down deeper, have a deeper root system, then it's going to be able to take care of itself in the hot weather and the drought scenarios. I know you've heard me say I'm a big one on, okay, let's maximize production by making everything perfectly happy so that it produces as much as it potentially can. You can grow any of these vegetables without supplemental water. But if you have some supplemental water, you're going to maximize production, obviously. So, and again, peppers are one that they don't like the cold weather at all. So, you know, I had somebody ask me once, when should you not let it produce peppers or tomatoes in the fall because it takes X number of days for it to produce and we're 3/4 of the way through those days? I don't know the answer to that. And actually it will vary too, depending upon the variety. Because one of the big factors is when is the first frost, and we don't know. You know, last year I was able to grow cabbage. I put it in really late, and I thought, well, I'll try and see what happens. But the cold weather was very slow, and so it ended up that I had, you know, the cabbage wasn't totally ripe, but it was edible. Where you know, when the October 15th date came around, which is normally when we have problems with the first frost and stuff, it wouldn't have been worth it. But it was late enough, the first frost, the hard frost, that I was able to do that. So that's part of the reason you can't tell exactly when to do it. So just let them go as long as possible. Squash are a plant that is kind of like the cucumbers. It likes it warmer, and the same thing as far as, I think I would plant seed over plants just because they're so easy. Again, hill them up, make you a nice hill, and actually you could even do that hill a little ahead of time if you wanted over planting. Also, some people will take and put black plastic over the soil. That way, again, it warms it up. And I forgot to say this on cucumbers, but I usually tell people your first three fingers. When you do your hill, then you take your fingers and you spread them out as far as you can. You poke them into that soft soil. You poke them in that soft soil and you put a seed in each one of those. And then you bury it, okay, or cover it with soil. The reason you do that is because, okay, number one, if one doesn't come up, you still have some plants. But also, they're going to spread. So that lets them spread out and they're okay because they want to grow basically a main vine that goes out. Well, if you have one going north and one going south and one going east or one going west, if you use four fingers, and that's fine, then you have that area filled. on that. And they're happy and they're content, let's say, by putting 2 or 3 plants in a hill on that. That's an easy, fun way if you have kids doing it too, that they can, especially little kids, because the seeds are big enough that they can handle those on that. You have winter squash and you have summer squash. The winter squash takes a little bit longer. The summer squash are like your zucchinis. I promise, and Meryl and I were talking about this before we started, I will promise you're going to have squash bugs. Okay, now, if this is your first year for growing squash, you're going to say, she was wrong. And actually, the first year, you usually don't have much problem because the bugs don't know they're there. Okay, when they find it, you're in trouble. Okay, and actually, maybe not trouble, but you have a project, let's say. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to do some sort of control. I don't care what it is, and I'll go through them kind of, but you need to be persistent and you need to be diligent with doing it. You can go in and physically cut, and I wouldn't take the leaf off, but I would cut the egg mass. Okay, the eggs are little white, not little bumps, let's say. They're kind of an orange red, and they the female lays them in rows. It looks like military guys. They're all perfectly spaced. They're all in nice straight rows. Now the row may be not necessarily straight to the vein, but they're all in it, and they're a little cluster. The clusters are probably a little bit smaller than a quarter, but you flip the leaf over, and usually they're on the leaf. They're not usually on the stem. They're usually on the bottom side of the leaf, and you'll see them. Well, you don't want to rip that whole leaf off because more than likely before this is over, they're going to be on every single leaf, and then you have nothing. So just take a pocket knife or a pair of scissors or something and cut that out on that. And then do not throw them on the ground because they're going to hatch. Put them in a bag, put them in the trash, put them on a fire, do something that is physically going to remove them from the garden. Okay, that's one way. Okay, and hopefully you catch them all before they hatch, which is nice because they haven't done any major damage. You've done damage to that leaf, but that's a lot less damage than the bug itself is going to do. Okay, you can spray or dust. There are many different insecticides that are labeled for it. And in my opinion, if you get on it early and you stay on it, any of them that are labeled for it probably work fairly well. The problem you run into when the squash bugs get big is that they're very hard to kill. All insects as they get older are hard to kill, but the squash bugs have this heavy shell on the outside, so it's hard for them to, you can't spray something on them and expect them to get it, and they're just about done eating, so they're not ingesting a lot of the poison, so it's harder. But keep it on, and then the advantage is that hopefully I'll catch them before they get mature, and not only am I going to catch Tuesday's batch, I hopefully will catch Thursday's batch on that. So just keep on it. One third possibility is to net it, put some kind of insect guard over it. But most of them are not big enough that you're eventually going to have to pull it off, but you've kept them away for quite a while on that. The other possibility is to do succession plantings where I plant some, okay, they're starting to eat this plant, totally tearing it up. I'm going to pick the plant up. I'm going to throw it I'm going to put it in a bag, seal it up, put it in the dump. And then I got the next one coming. And they're going to eat it, but I can get a little bit of a crop out of it. I might get 1 or 2 harvests. And with squash, you have more than you need. So then I can go to the next one and do something like that. They seem to like the summer squash better than the winter squash on that. The winter squash are like your butternut, your spaghetti squash. There's several of them that are more, they take longer to mature. The summer squash you want to pick quick because they grow like a mile a minute. The winter squash you have to wait until, to keep it long, and that's the idea, is they keep for a long time. You want to wait until you try to put your thumbnail in it, and you can't hardly put your thumbnail in it, then they're ripe on that. So that's kind of how you would do those. And it appears that the squash bugs don't like those as well as they do other things on that. And if there was something else I was going to say about squash, and I don't remember what it was. So I guess it's okay. That was the 3 that were everybody wanted. Now, let me see if I can get over to the question. Okay. Let's see. Okay, now here's here. Okay, I'll read it out loud, Cindy, now that I know it's not just for me. It says, I've always done the mounds or hills because my dad told me to. However, I have a raised bed next to where I usually planted my cucumbers. It's about 8 foot long by 2.5 foot high. I was thinking of ramming dirt up against the entire length of it and planting the cucumbers at the top of the mound and let them just grow down that hill. Am I doomed to failure if I go against my dad's advice and try this, or should it in theory work the same, or do I just do my 3 mounds? Oh, and if I have time, talk about okra. Okay. Um, I think you'll be okay, but the question I would ask, if your raised bed is made out of wood, I probably wouldn't do it because that's going to speed up the decay of the wood on that. But you have a hill, and I would probably put it out a little bit from the bed, because not only you have a structure there that is not going to hold water. And so what's happened, it's going to be drier there than it would be if it was in the ground on that. And that's not bad as long as you remember that, and then watch the moisture on it. On that, if you make your mound too high, you might have some issue with watering because the water will bead off. So those are things to think about. But I think you'd be okay. But I probably would not recommend it if you had wood there, just because could rot your wood quicker. And then you also have the problem of going against what your dad said. That's between you and your dad. So. So now, as far as okra, we'll talk about okra a little bit. Okra is, you can, again, get plants or seeds. It's fairly easy to come up from seed. Okra is actually a very beautiful plant when it comes up. It gets some size. It has an awesome yellow flower that probably is the size of a softball. The kicker on okra, loves the heat on that. So again, be patient. But pick it regularly, and it might be every day or every other day, because the smaller the pods, the more tender they are. When they get to the point that they're 6 or 8 inches across, they're I'm going to say garden art. They're not going to be edible. They're going to be tough and chewy and grainy. But if you do the small ones, you can that's the way to do it. Okay, I go on vacation, I forgot to have somebody pick them. I got a bunch of big ones. Cut them off. Because the ultimate goal of all plants is to produce seed. The okra pod is a seed. So, hey, look, I got my job done. I'm just going to wait now. I'm not going to produce as much seed because I already got some. So cut it off, and it says, oh, shoot, I need to grow more. And so then it'll keep going for you. I was reading something earlier that you could actually take and cut them back some if they've overgrown, and they'll bush out at the side and bloom again for you. They take a little bit of time to get going, so don't wait till don't wait till August to try it, because it's probably not going to work. But and there are some, and I know they're edible, but they're kind of ornamental too. There's some red, I don't know, red potted okra, I guess you could say, that are a little more, have a little bit of interest just because of the color of the pod on that. But they're kind of a neat plant, and they do well here. I mean, a lot of people don't eat them, but they do really, really well. And that's actually one I do eat. It's pretty good. So, okay. And then the question is, they saved seed from the okra last year. Keep this in mind with your vegetables, particularly vegetables. It's also true with a lot of your flowers, but not all of them. These are hybrids. Okay. So what they did is they crossed A and B and got C. And so it's just like everything else. If you have 3 kids, they're not exactly the same. So it may be exactly the same or close to it, that you won't notice any difference. It could be that it's taller, it's shorter, it doesn't produce as well, it produces better. It may be that doesn't taste as good. It may be hard. What do I want to say? Harder, or there's a lot of variations. If you want to play, no big deal on that. If it's like, wait a second, I want okra, then I would suggest getting some seed. Remember what I said about the flower, though. It's a neat little plant, and it probably will look good even though you did it from your own seed. But you do run the possibility of it not being exactly the same as what you had last year. We had, now you're not going to eat them, but we had castor beans out here in the berm 2 years ago. And so we decided we didn't have any castor beans. So we said, okay, let's just let the ones that are coming up, the volunteers come up, and we'll use those. Well, the ones we had last year or the year before were red. leaves and red flowers and red leaves and red seed pods. And last year they were red and green, and not red and green on the same plant, but we had a lot of green ones. So they reverted on that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but just keep in mind that it may not be exactly the same. And that's the same with all your vegetables. And particularly when you get into like the different ones, like the bush ones, or, your colored, like your colored peppers, your colored carrots, your colored things like that. The melons are really good about reseeding themselves, particularly if you have some that are rotten, you'll get a bunch of them come up. But again, like cantaloupe, I know one year my mom told me that she said, my cantaloupe just doesn't taste very good. So I know, Mom, so I quizzed her and I said, did you plant new plants or did you just let volunteers come up? Oh, I just let the volunteers come up. So that told me that, hey, they weren't, yes, they were cucumbers. Or, yes, they were muskmelon, but they weren't, because they were a cross, and then the offspring wasn't near as good as the parent plant. So keep that in mind on that. Okay, I don't think that's the questions we have. I don't know if anybody else has other questions. If you got more questions, put them in. I'll wrap up here. No, sorry, no, never mind, I said that. The next seminar is going to be on growing the perfect tomato, so we'll talk pretty much exclusively on tomatoes. I may say, like I talked a little bit on tomatoes today, I may say, okay, peppers are going to have the same problem. But it's next Thursday is tomatoes, and then next Saturday, I know Marilyn's going to come, but we're going to do a seminar, and it's going to be in person for beginning vegetable garden, and that is going to be in the greenhouse. So we'll have chairs and stuff, and we'll have notes, but we're going to spread out. And I would suggest, I don't know, the greenhouse is not heated, so I would suggest to make sure that you wear a coat or something, depending on what the temperature is, because it might be a little cold. And that one, I am not going to, it does say limit 10. We're not going to worry about limiting it because we can spread out quite a bit. But it'll be in the greenhouse, and it's a Saturday, and it starts at 10:30. And that one we will do an hour because we'll have time on that. So, and to kind of give you a couple of rundowns here, just so you know, not next Thursday, but 2 weeks, we're going to do raised beds. On that, we'll talk about raised beds, and that one is going to be a Zoom one. But then again, on the 24th of March, we're going to do fruit tree pruning, and that one will be live. And we have a small orchard out here, so we will actually go out and prune the trees and tell you what we're doing and why we're doing it. Depending upon how brave people are, we have enough trees that we may turn people loose and let them prune some if they want to on that. So again, we're not going to really limit it. We don't usually have a lot of people for that one, but the ones we do have are usually very interested in it. So that one's in person. And then the 31st of March, we're going to do roses, and it will also be in person. We'll go out and show you roses and what to do as far as pruning and go over a little bit. So that will be it. And then the last two are growing in containers and pollinator gardens, and those will also be on Zoom, unless it just looks like it's going to be really nice and nobody knows what COVID is anymore because it's ancient history. So kind of give you an idea. So I will say thank you for coming. Let's see. Oh, wait a minute. I got one more thing. Okay. She's just giving me a little note. So thanks for listening, and hopefully we will see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
You're welcome.
Good night.
We'll see you. Okay.